So, recently, I made a video looking back at Dishonored 1, and how, despite its age, the game still holds up really well. After finishing that video, I began to think about Dishonored 2, and how it holds up, not just as a game, but also as a sequel in the shadow of the original. Dishonored 2 takes place 15 years after the first game, during a grown-up Emily's reign, where her now confirmed father Corvo serves as her royal protector. Not everything is stable though, since in recent months, a number of Emily's biggest critics have been brutally murdered by the so-called Crown Killer, with many among the public assuming that Corvo is responsible, under orders from Emily. The story begins at Dunwall Palace, where a remembrance ceremony is taking place to remember the assassination of Emily's mother at the beginning of the last game. During the ceremony, Delilah from the previous game's DLCs returns from the dead, leading a coup against Emily, claiming she is the previous Empress's sister and the rightful heir of the throne. And this is where you get to pick whether you will play as Corvo or Emily throughout the game, with the other being frozen in stone by Delilah. The first true level sees you escaping from Dunwall Tower and going through the streets of Dunwall to the docks, where you find the boat The Dreadful Whale and its captain Megan Foster. This boat serves as the second game's version for Hound Pit's pub, with it being where you will spend your time between missions, with there being some optional small maintenance tasks that will pop up every now and again. The cast for Dishonored 2 is also smaller than the first game, with there not being many characters at all on board the Dreadful Whale as the game goes on. I suppose this isn't too bad, since you don't really spend much time on the boat in the first place. The gameplay itself has been developed from its predecessor. First off, accepting the Outsider's powers is now completely optional. Something I was especially happy about when the game released is that Emily and Corvo actually have different Outsider powers. Corvo's are pretty much the same as the last game, but Emily has a series of new powers. To be honest, it would have been really easy for the developers to just be lazy and give them both the exact same powers and have them play the exact same, but they didn't, and it's something that I'm glad about. Some of their powers do have the same role, such as Corvo's Blink and Emily's Far Reach, but they do handle differently, with Emily's being more like a slingshot type thing. Of course, there is also the return of the Heart, Runes and Bone Charms. Runes can now be crafted by sacrificing other bone charms and using whale bones. There is a chance that your bone charms can be corrupted by this process. The chance of this happening can be reduced by spending more runes to upgrade bone charm crafting, just like you would with powers. The Outsider powers aren't the only part of the combat system to get updated. Sword combat seems a lot more refined and smooth, with there now being power attacks done by holding down the attack button, as well as finally being able to not just assassinate, but knock out enemies when dropping on them from above. The combat in the first game was already pretty good, but here it just feels better in pretty much every way. One of the most welcome new additions is the ability to quick save and quick load. In a game like Dishonored, it is especially useful, since if you were trying to do a playthrough without being seen, being able to instantly save and reload the game is such a useful quality of life feature. Another extremely welcome addition is custom difficulty. There are so many different settings, from how much sound you make while walking, to how easily spotted you are, and everything in between. At the end of every level, there is an updated screen with a chart showing how well you did, with how many kills and how many times you were detected, all clearly displayed. Personally, I think that level design is one of the main things that made the first Dishonored such an incredible game. It played such a crucial role not just to the actual gameplay opportunities that arose from it, but also in storytelling. Every level told you something about the game world and made it feel alive. It all felt just so practical, and made sense within the game world. Luckily, all of that is carried over to the sequel. Not only is each level masterfully crafted, but many of them even have unique mechanics. I think the two standout examples are the two mansion levels in the game. The first has you in the Clockwork Mansion, where scattered around buttons can completely change up the room you are in. This offers up a lot of gameplay opportunities, especially since you can sneak behind the walls and navigate the machinery that make this mansion possible. The evil genius behind the mansion, Jindosh, will quickly become aware of your presence if you go around pressing every single button, however, but it is completely possible to navigate through the place without him even being aware that you are there. As well as the ever-changing rooms, the mansion is guarded by the strong and intimidating clockwork soldiers. The other mansion mission in the game has you using a temporary gift from the outsider to jump between the past and the present of the building, with there being different enemies in each time period. This level is one of my favourites in the entire series, since jumping between time zones and seeing actions in the past, instantly having impacts on the modern day, is just brilliant. Genuinely, this level is impressive in so many different ways. This time around, there is no Piero to sell us items before missions. Instead, there are more black market shops that serve the same purpose, but are actually located in missions. If you don't feel like paying the asking price for these items, you can always just break in and rob the place. While I would say the majority of Dishonored 2 is better than its predecessor, there is one specific area where I think it falls short: the story. I wouldn't say it's bad or anything, but compared to the original game, it just seems weaker in many areas. The main villain Delilah is alright, with her being a returning character from one of the first game's DLCs, but I really wouldn't say that she is anything special as a main antagonist. I'd say that goes for the entire story. It's serviceable, but just not anything special, and weaker than the first game. This probably would have been a massive problem, if it wasn't for the fact that everything else in the game was so strong. While the story is weaker, there is more characterisation for Emily and Corvo, since both of them have full voice acting in the game, and will even comment on some of the events going on around them. There is also a travel journal that can be updated when returning to the Dreadful Whale. The journal is a good way to remember what you were doing last time you played, if you take a substantial break from a playthrough. Performance-wise, almost everything has been improved since the first game. In all my time playing the game over the years, I can't really think of any major issues that I've actually had. The graphics are also enhanced from the first game, while also managing to retain most of the art style that made the first game so distinct in its visuals. I find that the second Dishonored is the better game out of the two. Both are really incredible genre-defining games, but with the unfortunate exception of the story, Dishonored 2 excels in pretty much every other area over its predecessor. Now that is the sign of a good sequel.